just a reminder that this program is off the record and closed to the press. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Amy Stokin, and it's an honor to be your Midwest representative to our crowd. I'm very much looking forward to when we can all be together in person again, but for now, thank you for being a part of our virtual community. I want to thank the Israel Consulate to the Midwest for partnering with us, especially Consul General Aviv Ezra, who you will hear from in a moment, and Chief of Staff Ron Rabi. And a quick shout out to the America-Israel Chamber of Commerce. I know Board President Scott Glickson and several of my fellow board members are joining us. Thank you for your work in strengthening the business bond between Israel and the Midwest. I know many of you are already familiar with our crowd, but for those who aren't, our crowd is the most active venture capital firm in Israel. Our platform was created to provide broader access to investing in high-tech startups in Israel and around the world. In turn, we leverage our incredible network, including many of you, to help build value for our portfolio companies throughout their life cycle. And in many ways, we serve as an ambassador to the world on behalf of the amazing tech that Israel has to offer. As you probably know, Startup Nation, or today Scale Up Nation, covers many, many sectors. Today, we are focusing on agricultural technology. AgTech is a priority for our crowd. It has become even more crucial since COVID, and it is of particular relevance to the Midwest in addition to the rest of the world. I hope you will agree it is a reason to be excited about Israel, about our crowd, and about the future. Throughout the program, if you have any questions you'd like to ask, please use the Q&A function, or you can email me at amy.stoken, S-T-O-K-E-N, @ourcrowd.com. To begin, I'd like to turn this over to Consul General Aviv Ezra, who has done so much for Israel-Midwest relations.
Shalom, everybody. Such a pleasure and an honor to bring greetings on behalf of the State of Israel, on behalf of the Consulate General of Israel to the Midwest. Well, during my years here in the Midwest, many of my meetings with the political echelons, especially the governors, was focused a lot of it on foreign policy and on defense. But to tell you the truth, the most important interest they had was how can we connect the dots in terms of business, trade, and economic opportunities. They were always interested in what Israel can bring in terms of high-tech, biotech, telecommunications, IT, artificial intelligence, healthcare, of course. And in this capacity, many of our friends in Israel, when we brought these governors for visits, we brought about 6 of them in the last 3 years. We're honored to introduce Israel's capabilities. And one of our special features was always Jon Medved in the ability of his to really introduce what Israel has in order to make that cooperation happen. So Jon and our crowd is a superb platform to really make this bridge happen. And I want to thank you, Jon, and I want to thank you, Amy, for making these things happen, and a superb opportunity for really taking this to the next step. So have a great program, enjoy it, and in the future, look forward to working with all of you, and especially introducing our economic team to all of the Israeli companies that want to come to the Midwest, and Midwestern companies that want to come to Israel. Yasher Koach. Shalom.
Thank you so much, Consul General Ezra. And now to our crowd's CEO, Jon Medved. While he falls in the category of needing no introduction, and he is probably the only person at our crowd that knows more people in Chicago than I do, I will just do a brief intro. Jon is a serial entrepreneur, and according to the Washington Post, one of Israel's leading high-tech venture capitalists. In a New York Times supplement, Israel at 60, Jon was named one of the top 10 most influential Americans who have impacted Israel. He is the founder and CEO of Our Crowd, the leading global equity crowdfunding platform for accredited investors and angels. Founded in 2013, Our Crowd now has over $1.5 billion in commitments and has made investments in more than 240 companies in 25 funds and has seen 46 exits since our launch. Our Crowd exits include Jump Bike, sold to Uber, BriefCam, sold to Canon, Argus, sold to Continental, just to name a few. Prior to Our Crowd, Jon was the co-founder and CEO of Viringo and the co-founder and general partner of Israel Seed Partners. Jon will take over after this brief video showing you some examples of Israeli AgTech in action.
My connection to Chicago is deep and personal. My wife, Jane, is from the North Side, from actually Evanston, and my son, Momo, graduated from Northwestern with his master's degree in law. So I love Chicago, and it's great to be talking to you about AgTech. I want to start, though, with a quick update on what's going on with Israel and the vaccine. As you might have heard, we are leading the world. You can see that here in this slide, with actually over 40% of our population now vaccinated. We're followed, interestingly enough, by the UAE, the UK, Bahrain, and the US. So literally of the 5 leading countries, 3 of them are partners in the Abraham Accords. And I think this is cool that you've now got the Middle East, Israel, the UAE, and Bahrain, together with the UK and the US, leading the world in terms of at least percentage of vaccinated. Now, many of you know that Israel continues to be a leader in technology. It used to be that I would have to use good slides from the Israeli embassy or your great consulate in Chicago. But today I can just go to the World Economic Forum, who provide this kind of data, and say that Israel is really top of the charts in terms of the growth of innovative companies or entrepreneurial culture, attitudes towards risk, companies embracing disruptive ideas. And this is reflected in extraordinary amounts of money that are being invested in Israeli startups. This past year, over $10 billion. And what was remarkable about 2020 was that this continued to grow even in the time of pandemic. We were afraid that investment would go down because people couldn't travel. And if you couldn't meet somebody and break bread and see them face to face, how are they going to invest? Well, we're doing a lot of things on Zoom. We're getting married on Zoom. We're having synagogue and church services on Zoom, and we are investing on Zoom. And here in Israel, it's going quite remarkably. It turns out exits have also gone up dramatically throughout the last decade, from 2 billion to 20 billion, and we don't think we're looking backwards. In fact, the size of the Israeli exits or the companies that are sold in M&A or in IPOs continues to go up, and today it's in the billion-dollar or multi-billion-dollar plus range. The Israeli tech ecosystem is really now essentially operating on all cylinders. At the heart of it, of course, are the thousands of great, talented entrepreneurs, but they're being fed by the IDF tech units. They're being mentored and acquired by the almost 400 multinationals, invested in by the thousands of angels and the 70 VC funds, and dare say our crowd, most active investor in Israel. And then they're being incubated and accelerated in a variety of those institutions. At the heart of Israel's tech boom is AI, or artificial intelligence. And what's remarkable is that Israel today is among the top 3 countries in the world in terms of absolute numbers of AI startups. In fact, we're sort of neck and neck with China. And this isn't on a per capita basis. This is on an absolute basis. If you want to see what it looks like, it's quite a crowded and wonderful chart that really shows all of these companies at once. Now, in addition to all of this, of course, the most important news of the last several months has been the fact that we've now signed normalization agreements with 4 different countries, in particular with the UAE. And this has really changed everything. It has literally created a boom in terms of investments and investment deals. We're working very hard at our crowd, and I would dare say leaders in this whole event. We're announcing, partnerships and hiring there, and you'll see a lot more activity from us. In fact, we've hired a head of our Gulf business, Sabah al-Banali. I think we're the first Israeli financial group to build a team there, and we'll be hearing a lot from our crowd in the Gulf. So just a couple of basics and then right on to the AgTech. We're, as Amy mentioned, we are Israel's most active venture investor. In 2019, we made 38 new company investments. Last year, we made about 40. If you look at our numbers, and these numbers have to be consistently updated, we're over $1.5 billion of commitments, 46 exits we're very proud of, 240 companies, and now almost 70,000 investors on the platform. The platform consists both of individuals, and you can invest from as little as $10,000 on up, all the way to institutions who are investing tens of millions of dollars. And members of our crowd, whether they're an institution or an individual, can either choose a company specifically, and we'll be showing you several of these today, or you can choose a fund. Now, our investors continue to grow at a steady pace, and in fact, we're actually growing a lot faster than ever. In the first month this year, in January, we're going to add 5,000 new investors just in the month, and we're just getting started. Again, you can pick a variety of different funds, or you can pick your own startup investments. Here is what they look like. You'll see that by design, it's highly diversified. So you've got healthcare and fintech, enterprise software, agriculture, cybersecurity. You can find a variety of companies on the OurCrowd platform. If you're not registered, please just go to our website, to ourcrowd.com, and it should be pretty easy. I'd love to get your feedback. Our portfolio is making a lot of news. We were raising big sums of money for many of our companies this year, and we were very proud of the fact that many of our companies were really leading in the fight against the pandemic and innovating in incredible ways. We now have a maturing platform of companies with over 60 of them now valued over $100 million. And what's interesting is that from our base in Israel, we're now investing all around the world. And in fact, last year, in 2019, 46% of our investments were made outside of Israel. So Israel is the strong beating heart of our crowd, but we're now a global platform, all connecting back through Jerusalem. And that's the way we like it. Again, this is out of date. We're up to 46 exits. And we're very proud in particular of the fact that in 2019, we had the best IPO in Wall Street, which was Beyond Meat. We invested as a private company. And this last year, we had the best IPO, believe it or not, of 2020. It's a company called Lemonade. It's not a food company. It's an insurance company, but its performance was spectacular. So in terms of what we do, we like to be invested in a wide variety of companies, again, ranging from AI to data to fintech to energy. 20 of our portfolio companies have been listed in the 50 most innovative companies in the world by Fast Company over the last 5 years. And in fintech, we mentioned Lemonade, companies like BioCatch, who are doing biometrics to prevent fraud. In cybersecurity, companies like CyberX that were just bought by Microsoft, who are securing the industrial internet. In mobility, companies like Skytran. That is not a vision of the future. It's real, and it's not the Jetsons. It's moving at 200 kilometers an hour inside a city above your streets. In healthcare, companies like Alpha Tau, who are shrinking tumors by shooting a tiny radioactive dart. In energy, companies like Locust View, who are essentially enabling the rebuilding of the natural gas infrastructure as well as other underground infrastructures. In artificial intelligence, companies like Halo that are accelerating the AI algorithms at the edge and running about 20 times faster with 50 times more energy efficiency. Or companies like Ripple in the food area, which is an extraordinary dairy-free milk made out of the mighty little pea with high protein, low sugar, and tastes pretty darn good. And then we're at AgTech. So if you look at our companies in AgTech, you saw some of them in that short video. Companies like Tyrannus, who are allowing you to basically spot literally insects and tell their sex, not just from a drone, but from a high-speed crop duster. Companies like Tavel, you saw actually determining whether or not the fruit is ripe or not, and then picking it with a drone. Or companies like CropX that have sort of a Home Depot-like do-it-yourself, drill this sensor into the ground, and then all of a sudden hook it up to the cloud and start getting really smart information about irrigation and about fertilization. What all these share is that they are driven at the heart by sensor data, by collecting this data, and then by using artificial intelligence to essentially plan the next generation. It's really remarkable to see how agriculture has gone so high tech in the last several years, and this is really just the beginning. If you look at what's going on in Israel's AgTech sector as well as the sector worldwide, and these are slides, by the way, courtesy of Startup Nation Central, which is a nonprofit and does great stuff, you'll see that AgTech investment has never been higher. This year, worldwide, in 2020, it was over $10 billion. Haven't got their new slides yet. And in Israel, also gone way up to be over 200 million in the year 2020. If you look at what this consists of, it consists of everything from data and communication to materials and substances. There are machinery and robotics, lots of sensing. And again, our sector in Israel now is approaching 400 different ag tech companies. So there's a lot to go over. Here you can see another breakdown of how these companies are essentially laid out. In many cases, food tech and ag tech are really one big sector. And in the yield and harvest, you'll see again, I think there are 3 of our companies on this list, Tyrannus and Tevel and CropX, we all spoke about. In the alternative food sources, companies like Dumatok, which we're backing, who are reducing sugar content. In inputs and production, a lot of companies in pathogens and pests and production and processing. Here's a slide showing some of the rounds. The rounds haven't gotten as big as they need to be, in my opinion. They're still in the 10, 20, maybe a Tyrannus was the biggest at $30 million. But I think you're going to start seeing ag tech rounds getting to the 50, 60, 70 million, which is where they need to be, and they will get there. Here you can see basically how many of the government-backed public sector institutions are involved in a variety of deals, and they range from the universities or the technology institutes like Volcani to a bunch of incubators that are backed by the Israel Innovation Authority, including our own incubator in the north of Israel, Fresh Start, which we operate together with Tenuva, Tempo, and Finisterre. And then you see a bunch of the venture capital partners at the bottom, including our crowd and whatnot. And then, of course, a major component of the entire tech ecosystem, but in particular the agri-food tech business, is our MNCs, or the multinational corporations who are active in the country. So to look at some of these companies, you got to start with our Chicago favorite, Tovala. It's not an Israeli company. It's an American company, which we're backing. This company is off to the races. Their sales grew, I think, about 600% last year. It's a Chicago company. They have a smart oven. They essentially scan your barcode and then ship you at a reasonable price, like $11 or something, a completely fresh meal. This is not a microwave. It's just a smart oven, and it cooks it perfectly. And if you don't know about Tovala, you should be checking it out. Here's another company, also not Israeli, but in the US and Latin America, called the Books, who are approaching $1 billion now of revenue. And we're invested there, and they're sourcing fresh flowers directly from farms. This company is an Israeli-American company, Phantom Auto, and you're looking at two very handsome delivery bots, from Postmates today, Uber. And these bots are great to deliver you pizza or your Amazon stuff. But guess what? When they get into a construction zone or get confused, how do the bots get out of trouble? Well, that's where Phantom Auto comes in, where they provide literally a remote control feature which can help drive them home. It's sort of like ET, phone home with Phantom Auto. If you look at the Tevel we mentioned, here's the amazing, smart robotic, drone. By the way, the leading robotic company in Japan, Kubota, is just now getting ready to join us in this current round at Tevel. No press, so that's not yet public. Centaur is a company who is essentially building an infrastructure for measuring how much fumigation you need to keep pests away from post-harvest grain. Turns out that you would just spritz this stuff terribly to make sure that it wouldn't be eaten, except it's not healthy and it costs a lot of money to spray the chemicals on this. And now by using IoT, you can reduce it and make it healthier. BT9 is an Israeli company who give you real-time cold chain information. So literally no longer just at the overall large form factor for a whole pallet. This is actually down to the box level. Trellis is an Israeli company doing optimization for the food supply chain using AI, and can save you 15 to 20% as a food manufacturer of your costs. Beyond Meat, we all know about that. One of our great investments in an American company, but that really has gone completely wonderful as far as we're concerned. Blue Nalu, which is growing fish protein, sushi grade from cells. And you'll be seeing a lot of those cell line companies, both in meats, companies like Memphis Meats, or in Israel, Future Meats or Olive Farms. Here's an example of a company doing it for fish. Ripple, we spoke about, great plant-based protein alternative. Zumatok, we spoke about, who have figured out a way to make sugar twice as potent and to therefore reduce the amount of sugar you need by half. And this company, Blue Tree, out of our incubator in the north of Israel, which is doing the same thing for fruit juices, dropping the amount of sugars in fruit juice without hurting the taste by 50%. Tyrannus, we spoke about. CropX, we spoke about. This company, Consumer Physics, we did not speak about. What you're looking at there in his hand is the smallest spectrometer in the world, and that is measuring moisture in corn. You might have seen on the video that it also measures moisture in animal feed for the dairy industry, or measures protein in soybeans, or for grain of different types. This is an extraordinary company whose revenue is growing very fast and actually helping a lot of farmers in the great Midwest. Remilk, one of our newest investments, who are growing cheese proteins from cells. Again, what they're doing is not using a plant alternative, but using biologics to actually create dairy proteins without the cow. You'll be hearing a lot about this company. And one of our newest investments, again, an American company, Plenty, who are doing vertical farming, extraordinary company who actually save about 95% of the water. There's no dirt or soil in this, therefore no insects. An extraordinary company. And then we have 3 different incubators, one in the States called Radical, our incubator in the north of Israel called Fresh Start, and our incubator in New Zealand, together with the largest dairy in the world, Fonterra, and that's called Spark. So we got a lot going on. I'm going to leave it at that, and I'd love to take your questions and talk a little bit about the future of AgTech, why we're so excited, and where we're going to be going in the next decade. Thank you, Amy. It's back to you.
I do have some questions. And the first question I have, Jon, is we hear about aging farmers like in Japan, and are there obstacles to acceptance of AgTech as new and unknown in the farming community?
It's a great question. And I would have expected a lot more objections to this. And what I think is farmers are sensible people. Okay. One of the things which, I found really cool about working in this sector is you're meeting with great people who take a long-term view, and that's sort of in line with venture capital. When we invest, we're not investing for a month or 3 months. We're not like public market people looking for a little momentum and then get in and get out. We take a decade look, right? In other words, we're right now developing our own ideas about what's going to happen, in these roaring 20s of ours, the 2020s, and where technology is going to be not next year, but where it's going to be 5 and 10 years from now. And I find that is really the way that farmers approach life. It's, they're very interested in the harvest in this year, but they take a long-term view of life, and they're very, it's not for nothing they call, for example, Missouri the show me state, right? They don't fall victim to hype or to fancy sales pitches. They want to see the stuff. They want to see it work. Now, this provides some issues in terms of selling into the sector, because you really get a shot for the growing season. And if you miss that shot, right, if your product's not ready, if you didn't manufacture enough of it, if you somehow have a problem, you got to wait a whole nother year till you really get the second shot for that. Now, that's becoming less of a problem as we begin to become more global, and we're selling in the Southern Hemisphere, and we're getting multiple growing seasons, or in certain kinds of sectors like berries, where they're hothouse kind of foods, we're getting multiple harvests. But I found that the interest in what technology provides for these farmers is off the charts, because the changes in what you can do for yield and profit. Remember, profit margins are not 80. It's not like software, right? We can get a 70 or 80% gross margin. Profits are rather thin, okay, on large volumes. And all of a sudden, someone comes along with a game-changing technology, and wow, does that make a difference in profitability? Now, most of our businesses are selling still to big corporations, to the Cargills, the Corteva, the Syngenta, the big guys, John Deere and whatnot. And then they're taking it on to the smaller farmers. But to the extent that we've had a chance to work with farmers, especially in America, but even in places like Japan, we're impressed. And I think that you're going to see enormous change over this decade in small farms. I think what excites me the most is the ability to bring this stuff into places like India or Latin America, where you can really change lives of poor people, okay, where you can put technology into their hands and put more food onto their table, give them banking services and bring them in to the circle of prosperity. And I think that AgTech is a big and great way to do that.
Thanks, John. Next question is, you mentioned food tech. Are food and ag tech really the same category, and does our crowd approach them the same or differently?
A really interesting question. They really are not the same. They're part of the same continuum, right? But the ag tech is a little bit harder than the food tech, and the food tech requires much more marketing skills, especially to consumers. So when we're backing companies like Ripple or like Beyond Meat, they were successful, have been successful because of their ability to get to millions of consumers. For the Israeli companies, we have a strong suit, particularly in what we call B2B, or selling to businesses. So companies like Tyrannus and CropX and Consumer Physics and others, sometimes are selling to small farmers, but they're really breaking through by selling to distributors or to big corporate partners. And that's a little easier on the ag side as opposed to the food side. But there's a lot of great food technology in Israel. They are really two, bookends, if you will, of the same phenomena. And the themes that you'll see that we're investing in terms of, replacement of animal protein, cell line growing of protein, reducing fat and issues with the supply chain and logistics, providing, state-of-the-art sensors and big data and AI to do this analysis afterwards, as well as robotics and drones of all kinds. This is, it's almost an unlimited set of opportunity, I think, for the decade.
Thank you. Question for companies that are interested in strategic partnerships with our crowd companies, what is the best way to proceed?
So first of all, by all means, go to our website and sign up. And then you can be informed, first of all, or just call Amy and ask her what's the interesting company of the month, because we're almost doing, I think this year between food and ag tech, we'll have like 10 new companies on the platform is my prediction. We'll come back next year and you'll see if I was right, but that's what I predict. So you've got to stay current, not just look at the past, but look at what we're doing now. On our website, we have something called the introductions feature, which actually allows you online to actually make an introduction or to introduce yourself to these companies and hook up. But we have a whole department in our company called business development run by Lolly David. And we have about 1,000 major corporations who are the big multinationals part of our platform. And Lolly will immediately hook you up with the companies that you want. You can send me an email to John at our crowd. You can be in touch with amy.stoken at our crowd. Okay. Or, you can simply go to our crowd investor services and send an email, but we love this and we will be delighted to try to hook you up with our companies.
Thank you. Next question. Some of these companies, what do you think they will look like in 5 years, and what will be the driving force behind the successful companies?
These are great questions, Amy. And it's amazing how you guys even dictated the names of the people who are, asking them. These are from real people. Okay. I'm teasing.
We're good in the Midwest. We're smart.
Yeah, no, it's all straightforward. Look, you hope that everything is always up and to the right, okay, and that you have the steady stair step. We like companies that are growing 100% a year, and they do that year after year for 5 or 10 years, and they get to be worth billions of dollars. It doesn't always work out that way, and in some cases, some of these companies have really had to fight their way to where they are. I'll give you the example of Consumer Physics, which is that little tiny spectrometer. We invested back in that company in 2013. Okay, we put the first $325,000 to work behind these guys who said, you know what, these big spectrometers, everybody uses it to analyze everything. We think that people should have it in the pocket of their pants, in the palm of their hand, and we can do it. And when I did my diligence, about 2/3 of the experts who I asked, should we invest, said no. This is never going to work. They can't make it so small, because the spectrometer is typically a big desktop thing. We went ahead and invested, and their dream was to literally give it to everybody. So you could measure your body fat, you could, measure the calories on your plate, everything. And the idea was to put it into a cell phone. So you walk around with your cell phone. Guess what? That didn't work. The product worked, but the vision of getting it cheap enough and small enough, at least at this point, to go into the phone did not work. So the company raised a lot of money, spent a lot of time going after consumer markets, and was in trouble until it realized that there was a market for this in ag. And they then started modifying it to build it into cups. So you could go and take a cup of animal feed or a cup of soybeans. And again, you had to test it. You could only test it, every harvest season. Okay, so it took time. So now 7 years later, after having initially, funded this company is now selling millions of dollars of product, growing at about 100% a year. But most importantly, they're selling not just the spectrometer, but what's called SaaS software, or software as a service, where the farmers, believe it or not, are buying annual licenses for this spectrometer software so that they can harvest their corn, or they can measure their soybeans or measure their animal feed. And this thing is growing fast. So, but during these 7 intervening years, it wasn't simple. So what will be in 5 years from now? I hope that consumer physics has, again, don't quote me, and don't, this is a wild scientific guess. I hope that in 5 years from now, they're doing 50 million to 100 million in sales, and they're a big company, and everybody has these little spectrometers, and they're doing it with partners. In the case of CropX, who make the sensor which goes into the ground, they've been buying companies. They've actually bought now 2 other companies. This little Israeli company is growing through acquisition. So if you have any good targets, let us know, because they want to acquire more. Companies like Tyrannus, who just raised $30 million, the top of the heap in funding last year in the Israeli companies, they are now with a brand new CEO last week, just announced a guy who ran a multi-$100 million company, who's bringing some additional great strengths to this company. And I think that you're going to see amazing things there. I think that AgTech will be a much better known area. And today, not everybody invests in it. Most traditional venture funds, they say, ag, I don't understand it. They don't really grok it. They don't get it. But there are a bunch of, especially in the Midwest, specialist funds that focus on those, and many of them are invested with us.
Thank you. When you look at remilk and how it's going to revolutionize the dairy market, how should traditional dairy farmers be preparing?
Well, I mean, look, dairy is such a big thing. Dairy's not going anywhere fast. There's no danger for their livelihood. They have to make sure that they're running their dairy farms intelligently, using spectrometers to measure, dairy feed, to make sure that they're identifying cows, a lot of data management. But the growth in plant-based replacements for dairy, and plant-based replacements for meat and for and fish, and then of course the next generation of cell lines, there's no stopping it. And I don't know if how much of the traditional protein business is going to be taken by these upstarts, but it's going to be healthy double digits. And if you've just watched, for example, what Beyond Meat, I remember when we first invested there, people thought that we were a little bit nuts, because we brought the investment to our investment committee and to our community at a $1 billion valuation. And I remember, I had one sort of irate investor who contacted me and says, I love what you do, Medved, but this one, you're out of your mind. Okay, I know you like burgers, but you're investing at $1 billion valuation for a veggie burger company. And I tried to explain to him that this was going to be a big trend, that it wasn't just veggie burgers, it was, veggie chicken, and it was veggie steak and veggie bacon. And, it was a movement. And of course, when the company reached a $10 billion valuation, this investor actually had the class to call me back and say, I was wrong. Next time I'll listen. And hopefully he will. But the reality is that I think that while these new replacements for meat and dairy will take significant market share, especially in some markets where there's a lot of lactose intolerance, like in Asia and whatnot, there's still, lots of life in the old dairy business.
Thank you. And can you talk a bit more, apart from AI, at a granular level, how our crowd makes its investment decisions?
Oh, very good. So first of all, we typically will see each and every month about 200 to 250 opportunities, and they come from a variety of sources. We get them from you guys. Okay, I think our best source now is our investors. The 70,000 investors around the world are sending us leads, and we love that. So please send them to Jon at our crowd. I'll turn them over to our deal flow team. You can actually have companies submit to our crowd on our web-based platform. Once we get these 200, we do a quick triage, and we review them at the deal flow team. We have a group of today about 30 full and part-time people who are responsible for evaluating our deals. They're backed by different experts in each and every discipline in which we invest. And then they'll I don't mean throw out, but they'll put aside 80% of the deals that come in. So out of that, call it 200 deals a month, about 160 will go into the not now pile, and then 40 will get looked at. And we'll take meetings with them today. Of course, it's by Zoom, and we'll try to down select that to 10. The 10 will then get, more serious discussions about their pricing expectations. We'll go into diligence, and finally we'll start negotiating with these 10, and we'll probably get somewhere between 3 and 2 of them, sometimes as many as 4, who we actually will sign a term sheet with. And once we sign a term sheet, we bring them to our full investment committee, which today we had an investment committee meeting. There were 30 people on the call. We're busy arguing, about 7 voting members and a bunch of supporting staff. And then we decide that we're going to invest. Once we decide we're going to invest, we put our own money in. We've set the terms of the deal, and then we invite the rest of the crowd to join us. That's how the process works.
Thank you. Okay, next question is, what portfolio exposure do you have to urban agriculture? And is there any potential downstream monetization of agriculture projects as real estate investments?
That's a really, really great question. And we are right now looking at a variety of urban sort of agricultural deals. Plenty, obviously, is one of them. We've got another one coming. Stay tuned on our website. It will be a company that's actually growing food ingredients in an urban environment that are, again, protein for both human consumption, but primarily for animal feed. And that's going to be another, real estate play. It hasn't gotten big enough yet for real estate to really take a large role, but I think that it'll be interesting to see how this works in some of these opportunity zones, because a lot of these will be using distressed areas where there's big empty shells of old factories in the Rust Belt, and they'll be turned into urban farming. And I really think, by the way, that someone who's smart about this, looking ahead, is going to actually do quite well with that market. I think that whoever asked that question is very prescient, and maybe be in touch with me. We'll talk about creating some kind of a vehicle to do that. It's not this year kind of investing, but over the next decade, this will be a big thing.
A couple more questions and we're going to wrap up. Next question is, you mentioned the fantastic openings with the UAE and other Arab nations. Are they showing any interest in having our crowd give them a tutorial on how to adopt what you do for their own economies?
The answer is, it really sort of surprised me how big the interest is in the Gulf in AgTech and food tech. I thought that this wasn't going to be one of our main calling cards, and boy, was I wrong. They're very, very concerned with food security there. They import at the moment, the estimates I've seen are between 80 and 90% of their food, given what's happened over the last year in terms of food supply chains. They want to make sure that they have a more secure supply chain. They want to grow 30 or 40% of their food. They import a lot. They're, a wealthy country, the UAE in particular. The whole area needs food. So they are all over Israeli companies. And some of them are very interesting. I saw a company recently that has a product to stop weevil attacks in date palm plantations. We haven't invested in it yet, but we're looking at it. There's a whole bunch of specific openings for these kinds of companies in the region. And, we're going to do much more than just tutorials, but we're going to be introducing our companies actively. We already are in the Gulf and building joint ventures to go really hard off of some of these companies. I expect that companies like Plenty and others in terms of urban and vertical farming will have a big response in that part of the world. Amy, there's a question about the Israel Innovation Authority announcing matching funding in impact sectors like food tech. Is this a value do you think can benefit investors or just PR? And the answer to that, in my opinion, is it's a huge value. I don't know how much, Dan, you know about the program that allows the Israeli government to back incubators, such as our incubator in the north. But the way it works is that they put together a tender, a competitive bid process where companies like our crowd can then compete for the right to run an incubator. We have to pay for the uptake for the essentially for the entire infrastructure, salaries, building, and whatnot. And then once we pick deals, the government provides 85% of the first $1 million of funding, which is significant. And it allows you as an investor to really take risk and to go early and big. And in general, we're out right now, we're operating 5 incubators worldwide, 4 in Israel, backed by the government. And we love the program. We think that it really means a lot to us.
I have a few more questions. We're going to do one more question and then we'll wrap up because I want to be respectful of everybody's time. But a question I got is the healthcare industry showing an interest in food and ag tech as a way of reducing illness and obesity with healthier eating?
Yes. And, there's a lot of interest in nutraceuticals, a lot of interest in, ability to grow essentially next generation of therapeutics in plants, such as fast growing tobacco, would you believe, and others. A lot of crossover between that. There was some research published just last week on the Mediterranean diet by an Israeli research group who started talking about mankai, which is this Israeli superfood made by a company called Hinoman, not one of ours. That in this diet, they feel that it's like twice as effective as the standard Mediterranean diet, which everybody knows is a good diet from a health perspective. So there's a lot of crossover. I don't think it's invested enough. Okay, I think that still our investments are either traditional pharma, traditional ag, but I think you'll see a lot of crossover and interesting activity in that area. And I'd love to see more deal flow there.
Thank you. I'm going to wrap up to say that thank you, Jon, for joining us. Hopefully next year in Chicago. And to all of you, whether you're an investor, you're in the ag tech space, you're just interested in Israel tech, please be in touch. I welcome all your thoughts and ideas. This is a continuing discussion. If you had a question that didn't get answered, please feel free. I know where Jon works. You can email me at, again, amy.stoken@ourcrowd.com. I'll turn this back over to Jon for any closing remarks. But again, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you to everybody in Chicagoland and into the great Midwest. I look forward to seeing you soon. I've got my second shot already 10 days now. So, unfortunately, our airport, I think, is closing down tomorrow for the next couple of weeks because while we are vaccinating like crazy, we are still quite high in terms of infection rates. And we've still got to lick this. We're all going to get through it and get back to visiting and traveling. And I'm not sure we're going back to the old normal, but I look forward to seeing you in a version of the new normal. And I want to thank you all for your tremendous support of our crowd. We couldn't do it without you guys, and miss you and wish everybody a healthy and a strong new year. And we'll look forward to seeing you at the next Our Crowd webinar. Thank you, Amy.